welcome back to another video. If you're new here, hello, I'm Kristen, and if you are not new here, thank you for joining me for another video. Wow, why is it so hard to say? Thanks for coming back, guys. For today's video, we are going to be talking about some terms that you might hear within the book community that you might not understand. So this is kind of like a bookish terms 101 is what we're gonna kind of call it. We're gonna ignore my curtain bangs. This side is thriving. This side is doing something else. I'm not quite sure what's going on over here. If I'm tired, if I look tired, that is because it is currently 9:46 in the morning. I always film in the afternoons. I'm not a morning person. I've been up since 6:30. But it's okay. We're gonna ignore a lot today, but what we're not gonna ignore is these bookish terms for you to learn. So main ones you need to know, we're gonna kind of like bullet go through them. I've got a lot of definitions because sometimes it's hard for me to put into words what the heck I'm trying to think about. So we have a lot of just like dictionary definitions of a couple things. First ones we are going to go through are some acronyms. So we have CR, that is currently reading. Kind of self-explanatory. So if something is listed as CR, currently reading. There is a TBR. We do a lot of those on this channel and we don't stick to them. That is to be read. Anything that you haven't read or you want to read is listed on your TBR. A DNF is a did not finish. This is a book that you start, but you don't like it, so you DNF it. You don't finish it. So I have a couple on my Goodreads that are in their own little category under DNF, books I didn't finish. An ARC. I also talk about these a lot on my channel. That is an advanced reader copy. So a publisher or an author will send ARCs out to different people. Sometimes they're just regular readers. Sometimes they are people in the bookish community like me, or other creators that review them and then post about them. There are also people that have sensitivity readers to make sure that sensitive topics are addressed correctly. So that's what a sensitivity reader is. Kind of another one thrown in there. POV is kind of self-explanatory. It's point of view. It's used very versatilely, not just within the bookish community. It is, so like if you talk about a main character and says it is in their POV or it is dual POV, point of view. An RTC means review to come. So say on social media a creator has posted about a book and put RTC, that is review to come. WIP is work in progress. This is something that an author would use to maybe say this is a book, it is a work in progress, but it'll be coming out on this date. An MC is a main character, so you'll see MMC for male main character, FMC for female main character. I'm not sure if there is a technical acronym for a non-binary main character. I don't know if it's NBMC or if it's just, they just stick to MC. I'm not sure about that, so don't take my word for that. GR is Goodreads. Goodreads is a website where you can track all of the books that you read. You can put books that you want to read in your to be read pile. You can rate and review and look at other people's reviews. You can follow people like me or Paige, Larry Reads. You can follow us all on Goodreads and keep up with what we're reading as we're reading it. HC is a hardcover and PB is paperback. That is just the different types of book. Like this is a paperback book and this is a hardcover book where the cover is an actual is a hardcover. Pretty self-explanatory with that. And then the last acronym I have is TW. That is trigger warnings. Most books have trigger warnings, so that is something that you need to look up if you're sensitive to certain topics. A good place to look at what trigger warnings are is Goodreads, Anybody's reviews will usually have trigger warnings or tell you to look up trigger warnings. There are certain websites that if you just want to Google book name plus trigger warnings, there are different websites that are dedicated to that. StoryGraph is also another website similar to Goodreads where you can post, review, keep up with what you're reading and everything that you want to read. StoryGraph is another one that is very good. It asks, when you fill out a review on StoryGraph, it asks you for trigger warnings. So that is also a very good place to look for trigger warnings. And then we're going to talk about a couple different terms that you might hear the bookish community say, like reading slump. That is just a period of time where you don't feel like reading. Maybe you read something really good and now you don't want to read anything else because you don't think anything's going to be as good as that. That is a reading slump, just a time of period where you don't feel like reading. Similar is a book hangover. Like I said, if you read a really good book and you're just kind of like still in the mindset of that book, it's called a book hangover. You don't really want to move on from it yet. A trope is a recognizable plot point or an element of a book that conveys something. So enemies to lovers, friends to lovers, love triangle, pregnancy, billionaire, single bed, forced proximity. There are so many tropes that I could make a whole video on different trope names and what they entail. If you want to see that, leave a comment below. Let me know so that I can do that for you guys. If you want a breakdown of all the big main tropes and what they actually mean. If you hear that a book has smut or spice, that means there is a sexual encounter written out in the book. That could be a very detailed sexual encounter. That could be what they call fade to black, which is very little detail. It's kind of like leading up to the moment, and then you kind of leaves it to your imagination as to what actually happened. Or it can be very detailed where it tells you everything that actually happens. So that is smut or spice. A lot of people will rate stuff on a spice scale and tell you how spicy it is. There are authors like Sarah Adams and Jenny Proctor that write no spice, closed door romance. That means there is nothing but really kissing in books. Reading sprints are where you set aside a time with, whether it's by yourself or it is with a group of friends on the internet, in person. A lot of people do it over Discord, or there's a lot of Patreons that are dedicated to reading sprints. It's where you set a dedicated amount of time and you read for a certain amount of time and then you don't read for a certain amount of time. So say you do 55 fives. That is 55 minutes of reading, 5 minutes of break. 55 minutes of reading, 5 minutes of break. However many times you want to do that. Or you can do 30 15s where you do 30 minutes of reading, 15 minutes break. 30 minutes of reading, 15 minutes break. So that is a reading sprint. Mood reader is a person who doesn't really set a TBR, just kind of grabs what they're feeling at the moment and reads that based on what their mood is. I'm kind of a mood reader. I set a TBR every month, but I very much do not stick to it. I kind of just read what I'm in the mood for. Whatever I'm drawn to at the time is what I usually will pick up. A book tour is basically just a music tour for an author. They'll go around to different bookstores or coffee shops or anything like that, and you can bring your book or buy a book from them and have them sign it and meet them. There are a lot of virtual book tours now because of the pandemic, but I think that a lot of people are starting to pick back up and do more regular book tours. It's just an extra way for an author to promote their book and get it out there seen for people. A buddy read is when you and a friend or a group of friends decide that you want to read the same book at the same time. A lot of buddy reads will set amounts of pages you have to read per day or per week, and you kind of discuss the book as you go. Me and Paige do a lot of buddy reads. 90% of our TBR is usually buddy reads. Even though we don't get to them all, they're usually buddy reads. It's a very fun way to read a book, especially to be able to like talk through your feelings about the book at the time of reading it. A fan fiction is a fictional series about real people or other works of fiction. So the After series is a fanfic about Harry Styles and the One Direction boys. The names are changed in the After series now. It wasn't on Wattpad, but this is a Harry Styles fanfic. Allie Hazelwood's Love Hypothesis is a Kylo Ren and Rey fanfic. Their 50 Shades of Grey is kind of a Twilight fanfic. You'd be surprised if you look into it how many books are fanfics, which is kind of crazy because fanfics I feel like get a bad rap, which sucks because there are some really great books, but I feel like it just ties in with Wattpad a lot. Fanfics do, and not all Wattpad books are great, and some of them are kind of weird fanfics, but there are really good fanfics out. When you ship someone, this is a very universal term used outside of the book community, is when you take two fictional or non-fictional characters and ship them, wishing a relationship on them. So you might be reading a book and you might ship two of the side characters and hope that they get a book later. An author's backlist is just all of their older books. So say you pick up Colin's most recent book, which is Reminders of Him. I have not read this. That is very shameful of me. And you love it. Say you're just so obsessed with the writing and you really want to read more of Colleen Hoover. You want to read all of Colleen Hoover. You want to read her entire backlist. A wrap-up is where I do a lot of these on here. If you haven't watched one, that is where I talk about all of the books that I read in such a month. Some people do these monthly, some people do these every 3 months, every 6 months, just every year, depending on how much they read. This is usually just posted on social media, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, or TikTok, which leads me to telling you about, sorry, I just had a coughing fit, so my eyes are watery and I sound weird, that's why. Which leads me to telling you about the 3 bookish terms for those 3 social medias. Lord have mercy. BookTube is YouTube, BookTok is TikTok, Bookstagram is Instagram. Pretty self-explanatory there. Okay, and then we're going to talk about, there are 3 different types of book, as far as there are novels, novellas, and then novelettes. I've never heard of this one. I've heard of novels and novellas, but I've never heard of novelettes. We're going to talk about the 3 differences between novellas and novels first. The obvious difference is page length. It's just number of words, page length. Novellas are usually a lot shorter than novels. Novellas usually have one conflict, one thing that happens. Novels usually can have a bunch, 2, 3, 6, who knows. So it's usually, a novella is usually one conflict, one big major thing that happens. It is usually very fast paced. Things are like happening. There's not any really dead time in a novella. Time that the actual novella takes place is usually a pretty short amount of time. So a novel might be a 2-year time span, and then the amount of time that the novel happens. A novella will usually be a couple weeks, and a novel might take place in a bunch of different locations. Novellas usually will take place in one location. And then we're going to talk about these novelettes. I guess that's how you say it. I'm not 100% sure. So a novelette sits between a short story and a novella. It also says subject matter, which is traditionally novelettes tend to focus on whimsical, sentimental themes. The modern day novelette, though, is more like the novella in that it can encompass different genres like sci-fi, drama, historical, short fiction. So I guess maybe a novelette was more of a thing in the past and not as much used now, which is maybe why I haven't heard about it. And then it says complexity in terms of storytelling ambition. Novelettes tend to split the difference between novellas, and short forms like short stories. Novelettes tend to have a greater focus on character development, world building, and plot than short stories. However, the stories are generally more concise and focused than a novella length work, as the word count is often too restrictive to tell a long story. That was a lot. And then there are obviously the different genres, which you have romance, you have sci-fi, you have women's fiction, you have nonfiction, you have fantasy, horror, thriller. I'm probably forgetting a lot, but there are the different genres. Genres are just like basically what the story entails, what it's going to be about. And then there is, I did want to talk about high fantasy versus low fantasy. I don't really know a whole lot about this, but I will read the definitions that I found for them. Low fantasy is set in an otherwise normal world with magical elements, think Game of Thrones. And high fantasy is an alternative fiction world with typical magic elements, think Lord of the Rings. There is magical realism. Magical realism is like magic that exists in the world that is considered normal in our world, so like superheroes, time travel. Main one that I wanted to talk about is dystopian, which is a fictional society where the government has fallen, the world has declined into a great suffering, injustice, and dehumanization. So think Maze Runner, think Divergent, think Hunger Games, are all dystopian novels. The last thing that I wanted to talk about was the different types of books there are. There are standalone books, there are interconnected books, and there are series. A standalone book is a book that you can read by itself. It is not connected to anything else. It is by itself. There is nothing else that world touches. You read it by itself. An interconnected series is something like the Some Kind of Love series by Jenny Proctor. It is 4 different books, but within those books, they are about different couples. So each book has its own couple. This is a very common thing in romance. You will see a lot of romance authors do this, where each book is about different couples, but they are all connected in the fact that they are all within the same world. They are all usually, the characters usually overlap in the books. Think the Off-Campus series by Elle Kennedy, the Midnight in Dallas series by Melissa Grace. I mean, there are so many within the romance community that I could sit here and name them all day. And then you finally have a series which is the same couple or same group of characters throughout the entire book across multiple books. So think the After series, the Hunger Games series, Divergent, Twilight, Addicted series by Kristen Owens. All those are series, regular series. I hope this all made sense and you learned something too. If I missed anything, please leave it in the comments. I will try to address it in a different video. If you want to see the tropes video, let me know. I hope this was helpful. It was a lot for me to learn at first when I first started reading and I joined this bookish community. It's a lot to take in and remember, so I figured this would be good. This would be something you can come back to if you need to know something, if you forget something. So I hope this is helpful. Thank you so much for watching. If you are not already, make sure to subscribe and follow me on all my social medias. You can follow me on Goodreads, and you can also follow me on Instagram. I keep up with what I'm reading a lot over there. I'm usually talking about it on Instagram. I post reviews on Goodreads if you want to know before I do my wrap up at the end of the month. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.